Today, I want to introduce you to the idea of a brand curve. This is something that we do at my church at least once per year, where we take our church's existing branding, we remix it with some current design trends that we're really loving at the moment, and create an entire new series of design assets that we'll use across every part of our church for the next season. To help guide us through this video, I've created a complete brand curve checklist and cheat sheet linked in the description below that you can download. So this idea of a brand curve comes from a broader creative principle that we return to again and again at my church called the creative curveball. And the idea is simple. Church is very repetitive. We meet in the same place every week, same time, usually with a very similar service order. Now, don't mishear me. This is a good thing. That familiar weekly church rhythm is meant to be an anchor for our lives, helping us return our focus to Jesus, keeping us tethered to God and the needs of others. Here's the thing though. Humans are incredibly adaptable, and the more that we encounter the same thing, the less of an effect it tends to have on us. I like to call this the familiarity phenomenon. Maybe you've experienced this before reading a Bible verse. You've read it 100 times in your life, you read it again, and if you're not careful, you might actually gloss over it because of how many times that you've heard it, almost like it's lost its potency. So what do? Maybe we read it in a different translation, or we ask God to help us see it through fresh eyes. But researchers can actually track this phenomenon. A team of scientists in Israel confirmed in a series of 6 studies that people remember the duration of a routine activity being shorter compared to a non-routine activity of the same time, meaning this familiarity phenomenon is so powerful, it actually affects how we experience the passage of time. Scientists in the UK describe this part of our brain as having a trance-like autopilot or sleepwalking mode that we can enter when we encounter predictable and routine parts of our lives. Like when you're driving home from your commute, maybe you almost forget that it ever even happened. So, as creatives serving in church, the familiarity phenomenon is something that we are always contending with, which is why in our church, you'll often hear us using the language of the creative curveball. How do we purposefully do something to re-engage waning attention in an environment of routine? Because you can throw a 100-mile-per-hour fastball, but if the batter knows it's coming, it's a lot easier to hit. If they're not sure if they're getting a fastball or a curveball, well, now you've got the batter on their toes. Another example of a creative curveball highlighted on this channel was in the video that we published, Don't Print Church Bulletins, Do This Instead, where we highlighted our church's print catalog. We almost never do printed items at our church, meaning when we do decide to publish a printed piece, it has that much more potency because of its novelty. That video is linked on screen and in the description. So let's get into our most recent brand curve. First, just to give you a feel for our base branding, you can see it here on our website, centralcc.ca. You'll find our logo, a shade of blue, which is our primary brand color, and the font on our site is a sans serif, that's Gray Cliff CF, which is part of Adobe fonts. So that's our base brand. Now, let me show you last year's brand curve. You'll see our logo and our shade of blue, but we introduced some complementary colors to go along with the blue. Now, are those colors part of our base brand? No, but so long as these new elements in a brand curve remain anchored to a few of the core elements of our base brand, it works. Now, consider this analog. We're publishing this video during the Christmas season, and if you walk into a Starbucks right now, you can expect to see a lot of the color red. Now, is red part of Starbucks' base brand? No. In fact, if you go to creative.starbucks.com and navigate to the color section, you will not find any red. You'll see their iconic green, a few supplementary neutrals, but no red. But then, if you scroll down a little bit more, you'll find a section dedicated to expressive colors and a description that reads, expressive color is informed by and evolves with seasonal trends. This is a brand curve, the base brand intersecting with trends to create a novel brand expression that's still anchored in the core elements. And look, I titled this video the #1 church branding trend of the year, which is a big claim, but truly, I prefer this take on fresh branding so much more than what many churches do, which is use their sermon series branding as the creative lead for a design refresh. 2 reasons why I don't care for this. Sermon series often change monthly, and if you're refreshing design that often, to me, it's too frequent. You do all that work, it lasts for a few weeks, and then you're back to the drawing board all over again. Second reason, sermon series design is typically void of any core church branding assets. So it does nothing over the long term to build and reinforce your base brand because the sermon series artwork is its own thing. Back to our brand curve from last year, along with the slides, we did lower thirds, we had a video countdown, and we had our hosting assets or our video announcements. And we did an entire video on those announcements linked on the screen and in the description if you want to do a deep dive into that. We now arrive at this year's brand curve. And in terms of vision, last year's design was very color-driven. This year, we wanted it to be photo-driven. So instead of a variety of color, we wanted to stick with the blue core color and supplement with photography. Last year's designs were also very clean, flat design. This year, we wanted a bit more grunge. Specifically, we wanted texture. And then finally, some of the language that we've been using a ton from stage in the last season has had to do with our church being multi-generational, multi-ethnic. People speak different languages. We're born in different countries, age ranges. Visually, I see that represented in design in the form of contrast, and specifically the typography in our brand curve. Big, punchy headlines paired with smaller body text, big and small, young and old. And just to show you how we got there, the first round of design that we did was not anchored in the blue base brand color, and it looked like this, very similar to the final designs, but without the blue color, for us, it just wasn't quite tethered enough to base brand. And this is the needle that you're trying to thread. You want the brand curve anchored enough in your base brand that it feels like you and your church, but not so rigid that you can't find a fresh expression. There are no hard and fast rules for this. So much of it comes down to feel. Just a couple more design notes to touch on. I really liked the execution on these Sharpie style scribbles across the designs, and the Scotch tape was a nice touch as well. Between those elements, the grain layer, and the ruffled page textures in select designs, there's a tactile feel to this year's brand curve that didn't exist in last year's. Let's talk checklist now. I've created a brand curve cheat sheet linked in the description that you can download. You are looking at it right now. And we break our brand curve up into 4 core categories. First category is video. We always do a new countdown, also a title slide that can be customized. Here you're seeing it with text for our kickoff that we did in the fall. And then there's a lower third animation as well that we use and can customize with different text as needed. Next is our pre-show slides. We do a number of these. I've laid them out in the cheat sheet so you can see each of them, and also so that you can use this creative brief in your own brand curve designs. If you're working with a designer or even just trying to explain this idea to someone, I found visual examples tremendously helpful in conveying the idea. Next up, we've got our lower thirds. We have a matching lower third for every pre-show slide, and then also 7 different blank lower thirds. Which leads us to our final brand curve category, which is our hosting assets. For our announcements, we like to put our hosts in one screen, and then either a graphic or accompanying B-roll in the other screen. And then we can pair any of the lower thirds that we already shared with these hosting screens. And so that's how we piece different parts of the brand curve together. And if you're curious about the fonts that we used in this year's brand curve, because I've yet to mention those, we went with Druk. It's spelled D-R-U-K. Strong and bold font family, perfect for those big punchy headlines that we wanted. And then we paired that with Helvetica New for the body text. Again, make sure to download the brand curve cheat sheet in the description. I'll also pin the download link in a comment. And if you want to see another creative project that we finished at church this year, check out the stage design makeover that we did just using donated gutters. That's linked on the screen. And thanks as always for your time, attention, and trust.